I've been married to Mark for 3 years now. We don't have children yet, and at first, life was simple and happy. But everything changed when Mark's father, Thomas, passed away unexpectedly. His sudden death from a stroke came as a complete shock to us all, especially since we had just seen him a few weeks earlier at a family gathering. Mark and I were living in a different city at the time, miles away from his family. His father's death hit him harder than I could have anticipated, and it felt like everything spiraled out of control after that. During the funeral, Mark's Aunt Clara pulled me aside and said something that left me speechless. She told me that Mark, as the only son, was expected to return home and be there for his mother, Jennifer. She said that Jennifer would need him now more than ever. Clara's words weighed on me, especially because I knew how difficult Mark's relationship had been with his mother. Jennifer and I never saw eye to eye, but I tried to keep the peace for Mark's sake. Mark didn't even ask me how I felt about the idea of moving closer to his family. Without any discussion, he decided to transfer his job to a location near his mother's house. When he told me, I was furious. I had no say in this huge life decision. I tried to explain how I felt, but he just apologized and said that he didn't want to upset me. He said he was doing it for his mother, and he hoped I would understand. To be honest, I wasn't sure I could understand. Mark's relationship with his mother was always strained, and I knew that living closer would bring more complications. Jennifer had always made it clear that she didn't approve of me. She would make offhand comments about how I wasn't the kind of woman she'd envisioned for her son. But I agreed to move anyway, thinking things couldn't be that bad. The first few weeks after the move were a whirlwind. I was adjusting to the new environment, and Mark was constantly busy with work. It was hard for both of us, but I tried to make the best of it. Jennifer, on the other hand, seemed happy that we were living closer. She invited me over for tea, which was a first. I was hesitant, but decided to go. When I arrived at her house, she was sitting in the living room with her daughter, Sarah, and a few other relatives. The atmosphere was tense, and I immediately felt uncomfortable. Sarah greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and Jennifer didn't even stand up when I walked in. Instead, she looked me up and down and said, "I didn't expect you to visit so soon." Her tone was sharp, and I could feel the underlying judgment in her words. I sat down reluctantly, trying to make small talk, but it was clear that Jennifer had something on her mind. After a few moments, she turned to me and said, "I'm glad you're finally here, but I can't help but wonder, do you actually want to be here, or are you just doing it because of Mark?" Her question was blunt, and I was taken aback. Before I could respond, Sarah jumped in, accusing me of being distant and unwilling to make an effort with the family. Her words stung, and I tried to explain that I was simply adjusting to the change. But Jennifer cut me off. "You've always been distant," she said. "I can tell you don't like me, and I've had enough of that." I didn't know how to react. This was not how I had imagined our first meeting would go. I tried to keep my composure, but inside, I was seething. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. I had already been branded the outsider, and no matter what I said, it wouldn't change how they viewed me. When Mark came home that evening, he could tell something was wrong. I told him what had happened, but he didn't believe me. Instead, he told me that I needed to make more of an effort with his family. "They've been through a lot, and you can't keep pushing them away," he said. His words stung, but I didn't argue. I just nodded, knowing that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. A few days later, Mark came up with an idea. He suggested that we celebrate Jennifer's birthday together as a way to smooth things over. He thought that if I took the lead and planned the celebration, it would show Jennifer that I was making an effort to be part of the family. I agreed, though I wasn't convinced it would make a difference. I didn't know if any gesture would be enough to earn Jennifer's approval. The day of the dinner arrived, and I felt a growing sense of unease. I had planned the whole evening, made the reservation at a nice restaurant, and invited Sarah and the others. I thought everything was going to be fine, but when we arrived, something felt off. The moment we stepped into the restaurant, I noticed Jennifer and Sarah sitting at the table with a couple of their friends. They didn't even acknowledge us when we walked in, and I could feel the tension hanging in the air. "Happy birthday, Jennifer," I said, trying to sound cheerful, but my voice felt strained. I didn't know if I was trying to convince her or myself that everything was fine. Jennifer didn't even look up. She was too busy talking to her friends, laughing as if we weren't even there. I tried to ignore the feeling of being excluded and took my seat. Sarah looked at me, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. The silence between us felt suffocating. I wanted to get up and leave, but I stayed because Mark had asked me to be there. As the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't welcome. Every time I tried to contribute to the conversation, Jennifer and Sarah would redirect it, ignoring me completely. Then, something happened that I didn't expect. A waiter came over to our table looking confused. "I'm sorry, but the reservation was made for 7 people," he said, glancing nervously at our group. I froze. 7? But I had made a reservation for 8. I looked at Mark, waiting for an explanation. But instead of helping, he calmly confirmed that the reservation was for 7 people. "Yes, that's correct," he said, offering no further explanation. I couldn't believe it. I felt betrayed, humiliated in front of everyone. Mark had changed the reservation without telling me, and now he was acting as if it was no big deal. My mind raced as I tried to process what had just happened. Mark had sided with his mother again, and I was the one left out in the cold. I stood up, ready to leave, but before I could make it to the door, Mark grabbed my arm. "Where are you going?" he demanded, his voice harsh. "You've ruined everything. Again." I couldn't believe his words. "You changed the reservation behind my back," I said, my voice trembling. "And now you're blaming me for the mess you created?" His face turned red, and he glared at me. "I just wanted to make sure everything went smoothly," he muttered, as if that explained everything. I couldn't take it anymore. I had been nothing but patient, nothing but understanding. But it was clear to me now that nothing I did would ever be enough. Mark had made his choice, and it wasn't me. I walked out of the restaurant not looking back. The next few days were filled with silence. Mark didn't reach out to apologize, and I didn't feel like I could make the first move. The tension between us grew thicker with each passing day, and I realized that I couldn't continue living in a relationship where I was constantly made to feel like an outsider. One afternoon, Mark showed up at my door, apologizing for everything that had happened. He said he had spoken to his mother and admitted that there had been a misunderstanding. He even suggested we go to counseling. But I wasn't sure I could believe him anymore. His actions had already shown me that I didn't matter to him. The final straw came when he asked me to meet with his family again. He told me it was time to put everything behind us and move forward, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when the truth was it had been broken beyond repair for a long time. I filed for divorce soon after, and Mark was left to pick up the pieces of his fractured family. The process wasn't easy, but I felt a sense of relief as I moved on. Mark never seemed to understand why I left, but I couldn't stay in a marriage that had no foundation. The months that followed were difficult, but I began to heal. In the end, I found happiness in a way I never expected. I reconnected with an old friend from college, and soon we were more than friends. Our relationship grew stronger with each passing day, and before long, we were married. Unlike my previous marriage, this one was filled with love, respect, and understanding. We soon had a child, a beautiful little boy, and we couldn't have been happier. As for my ex-in-laws, I don't think about them anymore. My life is finally mine to live, and I have no regrets. The toxicity I once thought I could never escape from is now a distant memory. And for the first time in years, I feel free.